Hi, everyone. Welcome to Watch Your 2020 Vision, a series of mini pre-recorded webinars. The focus on this webinar will be the housing allowance exclusion as it pertains to you in your retired relationship with the annual conference. My name is Bob Christophel. I'm the manager of benefit education at Wespath Benefits and Investments. This housing allowance exclusion is a very important tax break for retired clergy, also enjoyed by other denominations as well. It allows you to exclude from taxation income that you're receiving from Wespath from the various retirement plans, such as ministerial pension plan, pre-82 plan, clergy retirement security program. Very important tax break, but you need to keep track of your housing costs in retirement. Whether you live in a home, whether you rent a home, whether you rent an apartment, live in a trailer park, it is your primary residence. And it is important to exclude from taxation the lowest of three different considerations. You really need to make a bona fide attempt to keep track of housing costs in retirement. And we're going to walk you through these three exclusions and talk a little bit about them. And then we have a couple of really good examples. The first consideration is what is the amount designated as a housing allowance, and generally that comes from your annual conference, and usually that's going to be 100% of what's reported to you by Wespath from the various retirement plans. That one's easy. We will report that to you each January. The second one is the one that you need to keep track of. What is the amount actually expended for housing? And that would include some items like rent, mortgage payments, mortgage principal, mortgage interest, real estate property taxes, utilities, furnishings, and maintenance on your primary residence. The third consideration is what is the fair rental value of that housing? Best way to determine that, perhaps you could work with a local real estate person. They could come over, take a look at the property, compare it to comparables in the area, factor in utilities, maintenance, furnishings, and provide you with substantiation, perhaps a letter indicating what that housing would rent for on a monthly and an annual basis. There are also some real estate websites out there, such as Zillow.com, which can provide assistance. So once you have these three numbers, it's easy to determine the exclusion. I'll give you a few examples. Clergy person receives $24,000 in pension from Wespath. That's been designated that it's allowed to be excluded, but we need to look at the other two considerations as well. So they've kept track of their housing cost, determined that was $20,000 for a tax year. They've gotten a letter with a fair rental of $21,000. So they have the three numbers. The exclusion cannot exceed $20,000. The amount subject to taxation would be $4,000. Let's look at another example. Person receives $24,000 in pension. They spent $10,000 on housing. Fair rental value, $21,000. In this example, the lowest of the three is the amount actually spent on housing, so the exclusion cannot exceed $10,000. The amount taxable would be $14,000. Then we have one more example. They receive the same $2,000 a month in income from the Wespath retirement plans. They're spending $25,000 annually on housing, and the fair rental value of the housing is $26,000. The housing allowance would be the lowest of the three, the $24,000 that's received. The amount taxable, subject to taxation, would be zero in this example. Then we have one more slightly more involved example, but very realistic. Common consultation topic with EY Financial Planning Services is how much can I afford in retirement on housing, and what is the best way to go about securing that down payment for that housing? So in this example, we have two clergy that are very similar. They receive the same amount of income. They are going to buy similar homes in the same town. And they're also going to have the same amount of expenses related to housing. What they do significantly different is how they approach putting a down payment on such property. One, example A, clergy person takes out a $40,000 partial distribution from their defined contribution account balance plans at Wespath. The other example, clergy B, does not do that. They perhaps go to a mortgage or a bank to secure financing, or maybe they use the retiree loan program available through Wespath. But either way, it's not a distribution. No $40,000 distribution is taken out. And you'll see that the difference is quite significant in the amount subject to taxation, the bottom line. Clergy example A has an amount subject to taxation of $37,600, and you'll notice clergy example B has an amount subject to taxation of $0. So that down payment coming from an outside source really made a difference as opposed to taking it from the defined contribution account balances. Just something to consider, and please always check in with EY for these complex housing calculations. A couple additional thoughts on this housing allowance exclusion. It's available to the retired clergy person, but not continuing to the surviving spouse unless they happen to be a clergy person as well, a clergy couple. We suggest you attach a note to your federal tax forms, whether you file electronically or manually. You can also refer to this section in your conference journal. We do have available at Wespath a housing allowance exclusion worksheet, which is a good starting point for keeping track of these different costs for consideration too, the amount actually expended on housing. Again, things like rent payments, mortgage principal payments, mortgage interest, real estate property taxes, maintenance, utilities, furnishings, and any other applicable expenses related to housing. This form is available by calling our Participant Solutions Center. I want to thank you for joining us on this mini pre-recorded webinar, the Housing Allowance Exclusion. Again, this is Bob Christophel, Manager of Benefit Education at Wespath Benefits Investments, signing off. Thank you for participating.